As I continue to return from my hibernation, I was awoken by Liverpool's 4-1 drubbing at the hands of PSV, which has rewritten the Champions League table or something. I still am so uncomfortable trying to refer to it like that, but I think you get the general idea. That was not the only super weird result. We're going to go through all of the results, even though I missed a Champions League match day because I may or may not have actually gone outside. We are back, and we start with the single most depressing team. Ajax, in case you haven't been keeping track, they are the worst team in the Champions League. They are very, 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 and this is true, very bad. They lost 2-0 at home against Benfica. Ask any Ajax fan and they will relay their depression to you. This is an important 3 points for Benfica because, well, they were tied at the bottom of the table with Ajax on 0 points. This is what we like to call the Depression Bowl. One of these teams is going to remain depressed, and that team happened to be Ajax, who lost it at home. They have conceded 16 goals. They have scored 1 goal. They have lost all 5 matches that they have played in the Champions League so far. It's remarkable. Inter, Marseille, Chelsea, Galatasaray, Benfica, not a single point. In fact, not a single match that was decided by only 1 goal. This win keeps Benfica in pursuit of a potential knockout spot. They do have a couple of easier matches coming up because they've had a pretty difficult run so far with Chelsea, Newcastle, and Bayer Leverkusen. They also lost at home to Karabag, but I hate to bring that up or else I'm going to have a hit put out on me by Benfica fans. Yeah, they probably shouldn't have lost that one, but anyways. Galatasaray at home against Royale Union Saint-Gilloise. My dog, Promise David, scored the only goal for Royale Union Saint-Gilloise, one of those players that came out of nowhere a couple of years ago. He's a mutual of mine on Instagram, and that is why I refer to him as my dog. The 1-0 win for Royal Union Saint-Gilloise, definitely a surprise for me, has bumped Galatasaray away from that top 8 at the moment and has handed a second 3 points to the Belgian side that is now, I mean, realistically, if you can get a road win against a Galatasaray team, you have the firepower to get into that top 24. They're looking at a potential Champions League knockout tie in their first time ever being in the competition, which would obviously be tremendously exciting for them. Next result, one of the teams I am most disappointed in. Perhaps the team I am most disappointed in. I will give a shout out to my boy Weston McKennie, who scored the go-ahead goal here for Juventus. They needed another go-ahead goal from Jonathan David of Canada in the 91st minute to actually win at Bodo Glimt. But Bodo Glimt have only wedged, I think it's 2 points from their first 5 matches. They got 2 draws against Tottenham and Slavia Prague. Slavia Prague on the road. Tottenham had to come up to the Arctic Circle. But now things are not looking up. They've lost at home against Monaco. They've lost at home against Juventus. That means they only have 1 more home match left. And Bodo Glimt was supposed to make hay at home, in the cold, on that artificial turf, in that uncomfortably small and kind of weirdly loud stadium that they play in. They needed to get wins, plural, at home. The max they can get now is 1. It's going to be really tough for Bodo Glimt to get themselves into the knockouts at all, and given some of the teams that you're going to see are in the knockouts, this is very disappointing for Bodo Glimt. I don't know what's happened to them. They've lost their swagger, and their defense has been not great. They've given up over 2 goals per match over the course of this competition. So they've been very, very shaky at the back. Big win for Juventus, though. I don't mean to overlook that. That puts them back into the playoff situation. They'd had 3 draws in their first 4 matches, but they hadn't found a win. So that 91st minute goal from Jonathan David goes a very long way. Doesn't look like they're going to be a top 8 type team in the Champions League, but heaven forbid you miss the knockouts entirely when there's 24 spots. Big result for Chelsea. Obviously helped out by a first half red card by Ronald Araujo. But Chelsea has been resurgent the entire year. They've been a team that has set its sights after spending billions of dollars to build this, to build this lineup. They have set their sights on elevating themselves as a team that is competing in the Champions League knockouts once again, as a team that's competing in the Champions League spots in the Premier League again. This is a huge step towards that. It is also a sign of the fact that both of the teams in Spain still have stuff to figure out. Real Madrid has not exactly been electric in Europe, and Barcelona, they do not have the same pep in their step as they did last year. Obviously, injury issues for Lamine Yamal have watered things down for them, but there isn't that same... It was pretty clear that Barcelona and PSG were the 2 best teams in Europe last year. And Barcelona has taken a step back from that, or a lot, other teams have taken that step forward to kind of contest. The goals were an own goal, Estevao, and then Liam Delap, who came in for Garnacho a couple of minutes earlier. Estevao continues a very strong, welcoming run with Chelsea. He looks like he's going to be an absolute dynamite signing for them. Dortmund smoked the Yellow Submarine. Battle of Yellow teams here, 4-0. Dortmund continues to be a team that they can't really do it in the Bundesliga, but they are a top 8 team in the Champions League table right now. They've won 3 of their last 4. Athletic Bilbao, Copenhagen, Villarreal with a 4-1 loss to Manchester City in between. This is all, of course, en route to Borussia Dortmund getting knocked out in the round of 16 of the knockouts, as is tradition, right? Dortmund just, they are who they are. And after a brief hiccup where they seem to be worse than who they are, they have now returned to the precipice of Dortmund being who they are. For Villarreal, this is definitely a disappointing result, though. This is a team that would have come into this expecting a hell of a lot more than 1 point in 5 matches. But the Spanish teams in general, they've struggled, right? All of the Spanish teams have struggled in this Champions League so far. You could see Athletic Bilbao is also sitting outside of the playoff positions right now. This is not a good look. Barcelona's in 18th, and Real Madrid, after their surprising loss to a floundering Liverpool side, is, they're doing a hell of a lot better than everybody else. I don't know what I'm talking about. But you'll see later that they are still uncomfortable. They're still rebooting in a sense. So struggles all around. Villarreal is a good competitive team in the Spanish leagues. They have not been able to put it together in Europe at all. Weird, surprising result that serves as a beacon, a flashing light for people that maybe overlooked Bayer Leverkusen after their Erik ten Hag experience at the beginning of the season where they were really struggling. They're not really struggling anymore. In fact, they've jumped back right into the conversation in the Bundesliga, chasing a red-hot Bayern Munich, and, they won 2-0 at Manchester City. So, still getting used to the fact that Manchester City's not just mauling everybody. Grimaldo in the first half on a shot that was kind of blocked towards him. Patrick Schick with a lovely header in the second half to give Bayer Leverkusen the 2-0 win. Now, of course, Manchester City was still the better team. This is how they do it. They're the better team analytically, and they find ways to lose anyways, but they are now in danger of not being a top 8 team once again. They were cruising to that so far, but you start losing at home to a Bayer Leverkusen, and all of a sudden you open up that can of worms. I mean, they're behind Sporting right now in the Champions League standings. For Leverkusen, they were on 5 points before this win. They were on 2 points before they roped in back-to-back wins at Benfica and at Manchester City to put themselves back in the playoff. This is a huge, huge moment for them. And they've basically changed their entire Champions League fortune over the course of 2 matches. And you see what I'm talking about here, that they've kind of exploded back onto the scene after that Erik ten Hag, the Erik ten Hag-induced start to the season. They've got the second best goal difference in the Bundesliga. And even though Bayern Munich is probably going to be impossible to catch this year, Leverkusen's kind of back where I would say they should be, given the amount of money they got for the Florian Wirtz transfer. And they've had to rebuild a lot of their team, but it's clear that rebuild isn't going horribly. Marseille with a 2-1 win, second half turnaround against Newcastle, who continues to just be Newcastle. Aubameyang with a 2-goal in 4-minute stretch to give Marseille, the flying penitentiary, the win. Napoli beat Karabakh, which might not look like a big deal. It is. They missed a penalty as well, and before the Scottish Messi, Scott McTominay, gave them the lead. This is the first loss for Karabakh in 5 Champions League matches, and the win for Napoli puts them right next to Karabakh in the table. So this is, based off the table, in the results so far, an upset win for Napoli. Obviously, it's not actually, but Karabakh, have they done enough to give themselves a spot in the playoff? I don't know. They're probably going to need more points. But the 2 wins against Benfica and Copenhagen that they started out with, the huge home draw against Chelsea in the last match, all of this working in their favor to try and make something happen. Remember, this is a team that had come in and never won a Champions League match before, and now we're talking about maybe their chance to get into the playoffs. So, good win for Napoli to avoid any sort of disaster there. And then Slavia Prague holds on for a 0-0 at home against Bilbao. I already talked about the fact that Bilbao underachieving along with Villarreal so far in this competition. 3rd draw in 5 matches for Slavia Prague. Mentioned they'd already drawn Bodo Glimt as well. They drew Atalanta out of Italy. Slavia Prague needs to find 3 points somewhere, and they could absolutely jump into this top bracket. And on to Wednesday, if you were able to catch some of this action, I'm sure you were paying attention to Copenhagen against Kairat Almaty. Copenhagen jumped out to a 3-0 lead before wonderkid Datsun Sapayev started a little mini comeback that ended up not producing anything for Kairat Almaty. They stay on a single point, while Copenhagen jumps from a point to 4. They're back into it with this win. It was a win they desperately needed to get if they were ever going to get to the knockouts, and they got it. And then the surprise package of the entire tournament. It's either Karabag or Pafos, who'd never even been to the Champions League group stage, league stage before in their entire lives. Well, now they've gone and drawn Monaco, and this is 88th minute own goal nonsense in order to tie things up, but this is a Monaco team that is significantly better than Pafos on paper. A Monaco team that is, with a win, very comfortably in the playoff positions, but instead they draw, and Pafos pulls itself into the top 24. They've only lost one of their 5 matches at home against Bayern Munich. They've drawn Olympiacos, they've drawn Kairat Almaty, they've drawn Monaco, they've beaten Villarreal, which is part of the horrors and trials and tribulations that Villarreal's gone through over the course of this Champions League. But their defense is incredible. They've given up 2 goals in 4 matches against teams not named Bayern Munich. They've scored 3 goals in that time. They're playing a bit of haram ball, but they're doing their job. They are doing their job. Pafos is playing exactly as well as they possibly could have hoped to play. And, I mean, I don't know exactly who's on their schedule coming up next, but would you bet against them at this point? They've got Juve on the road, Chelsea on the road, and Slavia Prague at home. Obviously, it's house money if they can get points at Juve or Chelsea. They can beat Slavia Prague at home. That would put them on 9 points and just might get them into a playoff spot. So this is a team that is worth paying attention to all of a sudden. Arsenal beat Bayern Munich. Arsenal is good enough to win the Champions League. Bayern Munich has been unbelievable this year. They had not lost. They had dropped a point in the Champions League. Now Arsenal's the only team that's not dropped a point in the Champions League. They are really the only team that is comfortably in the top 8 right now with 3 matches to go because of their 15 points. And maybe most impressively, they've conceded a single goal the entirety of the Champions League, and it was in this match to Bayern Munich. It was Leonard Carl that scored before Arsenal was able to open it up in the second half. Arsenal is running away with the Premier League. Arsenal is running away with the Champions League. It is possible, given the struggles we've seen from Barcelona, the struggles we've seen from Real Madrid, the struggles, obviously, that have hit teams like Liverpool and Manchester City, the fits and starts we've gotten out of PSG after their dominant finish to the season last year. It is possible that Arsenal is the best team in Europe. Now, obviously, they're going to have to go out and prove that over the course of the rest of the season, but they are playing like it right now. There is basically an inarguable fact that they are the best team in Europe. The only team you could have debated that with might have been Bayern Munich at the moment, and Bayern Munich caught these hands going to London. So the Gunners right now are there. Their elusive European crown is staring right back at them. Atletico Madrid still going strong. They won 2-1 on a late goal from the long-tenured center back Jose Maria Jimenez. He has a knack for scoring those late important goals. This is the first non-win, the first drop points for Inter over the course of this competition, and a big win for Atletico Madrid, who dropped 2 of their first 3 matches to Arsenal and Liverpool, which is obviously understandable, and they have proven that that was a bit of a scheduling fluke. I would say Atletico Madrid, especially with this win in their back pocket, is one of the favored teams to get a top 8 position when all is said and done. Eintracht Frankfurt continues to potentially get blown out in every match they play. Lost 3-0 at home to Atalanta. Very good result for Atalanta. And Eintracht Frankfurt is sputtering. They are struggling. Atalanta has now pulled itself up with back-to-back wins against Marseille and Eintracht Frankfurt to be on the edge of the top 8. Eintracht Frankfurt, though, obviously they've caught a couple of big losses to Liverpool, Atletico Madrid, and Atalanta. They need to find some wins. They're probably not going to get one in their next match either. They're going on the road against Barcelona. It's a tough schedule, but Frankfurt needs to win at some point in these final couple of matches if it's going to pull itself back up. They've got Karabag away and then Tottenham at home. We've documented that Karabag is tough. Then they're at home against Tottenham, and honestly, the way Eintracht Frankfurt's been playing, you might back Tottenham to go pick up at least a draw in that match. Eintracht Frankfurt is in danger of being one of those teams that just dramatically underperforms once you get to this level. I made a whole other video about this, so I won't talk about it much, but Liverpool has been beaten by PSV. One of the surprise teams coming out of Europe last year is doing it again. They're on 8 points, 15th in the table. They're still, it would be a long shot for them to get a top 8 finish, but if you can beat Liverpool, who knows? Liverpool obviously is going to struggle to get a top 8 finish if they're losing by 3 goals to a Dutch team that's not a high-powered Ajax. Then there's the Real Madrid situation. I didn't know what to make of this. Red Olympiacos, a European champion from 2 years ago at the Conference League level. Dangerous team. Marinakis over there on the sideline, threatening death to any player that doesn't execute well enough, I could only assume. And they go down 1-0, Real Madrid, to this side, Olympiacos, in the 8th minute before grabbing 3 goals by the 29th minute to supposedly make it easy enough. Then Mehdi Taremi, Mbappe stretches it out again, and then Okabe scores in the 81st minute. Now, Real Madrid won this match, and they had a comfortable lead for a good part of it. They, however, did get outshot and out-XG'd, albeit marginally, by Olympiacos away. And there is a feeling, I guess, in parts that there's a lot of that angst around Xabi Alonso, that they're just winning on talent alone right now. And I'm very interested to see how this plays out when they're coming up against sturdier opposition talent-wise. Sporting, big win, 3-0 over Club Brugge. Club Brugge came into this with a ton of momentum. They won their opening match as well, just destroying Monaco, but that momentum has since faded. They got their draw against Barcelona, but they lost to Atalanta, lost to Sporting. Opportunities to actually go out and pick up another win are eluding Club Brugge, and they're one of those teams that looked like a favorite to be a weird knockout team in the Champions League once again, that they're kind of fumbling. And then PSG kind of pulling a Real Madrid here. They went behind 2-1 early in the second half at home against Tottenham before grabbing a couple of goals to stretch it out to 4-2, and then a penalty from Vitinha iced it off. A couple of goals from Kolo Muani is going to be a bright spot for Tottenham, but the fact that they couldn't keep PSG away from the goal is not unusual considering that PSG is, well, maybe the best offensive team in the entire world. Still, even after I've been talking about how good Arsenal has been. Tottenham feels like a team that's going to go into the playoff. They felt like a team that's going to go into the playoff the entire time. This is their first defeat. They have a get-right match against Slavia Prague at home in their next Champions League tie. They hang a win up there. They're basically going to be comfortably in the playoff straight through to the end. So not a bad spot for them. A lot of high-scoring matches, a lot of big scores, and a couple of big teams struggling. The Champions League, of course, as always, well, it's just going to be interesting. That's what it is. It's the best teams in Europe playing each other. Except for Liverpool. Sorry, too soon?